Hi everyone, welcome to the first screencast of 2015. This one is on ethnicity and crime, and looking particularly at the higher rate of crime of ethnic minorities and the argument that these stats are valid that we looked at last week. But why is that the case? We're going to look at a structural explanation, so how society is structured, and does that offer an explanation as to why we have higher rates of crime in ethnic minorities? Apply any social theory that we can, and also see how valid these explanations are. So there are two main arguments to explain the statistics: a structural view, or a view that the statistics are actually real and they are very valid. But the structural view looks at how society is structured and how there's the inequality in society, I suppose, and the lack of opportunity structures mean that ethnic minority groups turn to crime more. The second view that we'll look at, and this is going to be done next week, is the social construction, so that the stats are a bit distorted, and they're distorted by external influences, such as police, criminal justice system, and that the behaviour of ethnic minorities are actually made deviant by these organisations and institutional racism. There's a range of theorists that offer different perspectives to try and explain why ethnic minorities are more likely to turn to crime, and particularly why black youths are disproportionately high in the statistics. First one, what we're going to look at is this idea from the left realist view. And Lee and Young, for instance, say that these statistics reflect that there is a real difference in the level of offending between ethnic groups. And that it shouldn't be overlooked and it shouldn't be disregarded. In terms of offering reasons why this happens, is that they look at racism, particularly from the police and the public, institutional racism and wider racism, and that this leads to ethnic minorities becoming marginalised and economically excluded, meaning that they turn to crime. However, what we need to be aware of here is that 90% of all crimes are reported by the public rather than found by the police. So this suggests that maybe it is the public, more than institutions, that are racist. If we are to believe that we can look at racism within the police, we need to think about the selective racism, because it doesn't really explain why it's predominantly black youths who are high in the statistics as opposed to for instance, other ethnic minority groups such as Asians. So if we are to believe what, if Lee and Young are to offer this idea of racism is a real reason why people turn to crime, then we have to understand that police would have to go out of their way to be actively racist towards a specific group, and that's quite difficult to do. Lee and Young also offer this idea about media playing quite an important role, which isn't surprising when we think about Jock Young being involved in this study. That the media promote a sense of relative deprivation, so they tell us what our societal goals and materialistic goals should be, and if we are marginalised and if we are excluded economically from society, then we are going to view ourselves as being relatively deprived, and this is exactly what happens with ethnic minority groups. They don't believe that they can achieve these goals legitimately because they don't have the same opportunities as other people within society, and as a result of this leads them on to join in deviant subcultures. So these delinquent or deviant subcultures that they turn to as a way of gaining these things illegitimately account for why there's high levels of utilitarian crime, particularly theft and robbery. Now this could be seen as a survival crime, I suppose, because if they are living in poverty, poor housing, they don't have much, then to survive they may have to steal food, they may have to get money from some other means so that they can pay rent, gas, electricity, etc., etc. However, what isn't as easy to really comprehend and understand and get our heads around is the non-utilitarian crimes such as violence and rioting, which is more of a political type of response to it. Are they rioting because they want to make changes and make a difference? Or are they just rioting because they feel as though this is what's happening, and this could be linked into labelling theory, for instance, or self-fulfilling prophecy. We also could look at Cohen's idea of status frustration, which is linked possibly into this Marxist idea of lack of opportunity structures. Cohen believes that particularly Afro-Caribbean boys, for instance, they have low education and also a high exclusion rates, and they can't gain a status in society legitimately, and they get frustrated by this, so they gain their status through joining deviant subcultures, gangs, and criminal activity, for instance. Ellis Cashmore draws quite a lot on Merton's ideas and also the ideas of anomie from Durkheim, in that young black men particularly feel the strain of being marginalised from society, and as a result are more likely to turn to criminal activity, want to survive and also to gain their status. Cashmore believes that blacks are trapped within like a disadvantaged situation, and they face discrimination and racism on a daily basis, and also their aspirations don't meet the reality of their lives. So this will explain why there's such high crime rates among young black people. If we offer a Marxist view a bit further, the idea of Stephen Box, for instance, that crime is actually inevitable, particularly ethnic crime, because of the unfair, unequal, and the class-divided society that we live in, especially for ethnic groups. Ethnic groups are doubly disadvantaged because of racism, etc., but also because they live in working class areas which are disadvantaged anyway, regardless of what your ethnic background is. So particularly young black people are doubly disadvantaged. If we look at the idea of an underclass theory offered by Taylor, this kind of supports the view of Stephen Box, but he argues it's more to do with a decline in demand for unskilled labour, with the lack of industrialisation in working class areas, and a growing rich-poor divide. Then it means people are going to be more likely to turn to crime. If we think about specifically with ethnic minorities and black people, a lot of the work that they did in these working class areas was unskilled, and then they can't turn to other jobs to gain their goals legitimately. So Taylor believes that, similar to Box, that it's inevitable that they're going to turn to crime, and that there's a clear link between ethnicity, underclass, and a criminal subculture. An alternative views offered by Charles Murray from a new right perspective, and that actually it's more to do with the breakdown of family. If we imagine that from last year, for instance, when we think about new right perspective on family, family fulfills a role within society, and if the family breaks down, then society starts to break down. Because we have more diverse types of family, such as single parent families, for instance, and a lot of black youths come from single parent families. Murray offers the idea that because of primary socialisation and a lack of a father figure, a lack of a male role model, then young black boys particularly are going to turn to criminal behaviour because they are not told through primary socialisation any other way that this is wrong, and they look for male role models in other places, such as gang leaders, etc., etc. Short and sweet video for the first week back. We are going to look a lot more in detail at the structural idea of ethnic crime in lesson this week, and then next week we will obviously look at the social construction side of things. Please make sure you bring your file with you to the lesson. We will be looking over that. I will be doing some file checks, but yeah, that's the end of this. See you all later. Bye bye.